There is another big event coming up, and it has nothing to do with WWE. It's a little show called All In. And after all these months of hype and build and all the sort of groundswell of support that there's been for this show from the bottom up, grassroots, I guess is the word I'm looking for. Cody and the Young Bucks self-financing this show. They put this whole thing together. It was really kind of sparked from almost like a dare or a bet, kind of, where somebody asked Dave Meltzer on Twitter, could Ring of Honor fill a building with 10,000 seats? And Meltzer's answer was something to the effect of not anytime soon. And Cody decided to take him up on that challenge and say, you know what? I think you're wrong. And we're going to try to prove you wrong. Well, here we are. And they're going to be at the Sears Center in Chicago, or I guess technically it's Hoffman Estates. And they're going to have 10,000 people in that building or thereabout for the biggest independent show in the history of probably U.S. wrestling. I mean, I can't think of another indie, quote-unquote indie show that has had a crowd or promised a crowd of that size. So this is a historic event, whether you support what they're doing or not, and I'm not sure why you wouldn't. I don't really understand that. There will be an all-in 0-hour pre-show airing live and free on WGN America. It starts at 6 p.m. Eastern next Saturday. That will lead directly into the All-In pay-per-view, which you can watch. It's on traditional pay-per-view, but you can also stream it on the Fight TV app for $39.99. That's probably how I'm watching it, through Fight. A lot of the stories in the build-up to these matches have played out on those Being the Elite videos that I mentioned, which in a lot of cases do a much better job of telling stories and stringing these stories together than WWE does on their weekly TV shows. There will be a 15-person over-budget battle royal on that 0-hour pre-show. Some of the names involved include female wrestler Jordynne Grace, who I think may be the only female, at least so far, announced for this match. Billy Gunn was just added to the match as well. Brian Cage, Moose, Rocky Romero, Ethan Page, and Colt Cabana are among the names announced so far. Maybe this is where we get to see CM Punk make an appearance. He could hit Cabana with his new move, the counterclaim, and this distracts Colt and causes him to be eliminated. But according to Cody, the over-budget Battle Royal is very aptly named because they are, they being he and the Bucks, they are indeed over-budget for this show. They had a budget in mind for it when they started this whole thing, and they have since crashed right through that. But there's no turning back now. I say go big or go home. By the way, you really do need to check out these videos that Dave Lagana and those guys are putting out on YouTube, chronicling all of the events leading up to this show. And all of the 10 pounds of gold videos on the NWA YouTube channel. They're very well done, very well produced. I really like what they've been doing with them. So if you haven't been checking it out, and I had missed a few, but I think I'm caught up on most of them now. Definitely take some time, to go through some of them at least. I think you'll be impressed by what they're putting out. But the winner of this over-budget Battle Royal will go on to wrestle Jay Lethal on the main card later in the night for the Ring of Honor World title. Now, I say that Bernard the Bear enters the Battle Royal, wins the Battle Royal, because Bernard the Bear, for those of you who don't watch any of those videos, you have no idea what I'm talking about. But there is a guy in a bear costume. He is a recurring character on these shows. His name is Bernard. And so I think Bernard will win this Battle Royal. And later on, he will reveal himself to be Flip Gordon, who is not booked for this show. That's another recurring theme on these videos. Flip Gordon has been trying his damnedest to get booked on this All-In show, and they just will not let him. Mainly Cody. Cody is the one who mainly is against him being booked on the show. And again, this has been a recurring theme for weeks now. They just spoofed, in one of the last videos, they spoofed the Dennis Stamp scenes from Beyond the Mat, where Terry Funk goes to Dennis Stamp. Dennis Stamp, he's since passed away, but he was a wrestler, and he was very upset that he was not booked for this Terry Funk retirement show. Save your laughter, by the way. I know, Terry Funk retirement in 1997. But this was one of the many Terry Funk retirement shows that were planned, and Terry was wrestling Bret Hart. WWF was going to let Bret Hart, who was the champion at the time, wrestle in the main event against Terry Funk on the show. And there's this famous scene where Terry goes and finds Dennis, and Dennis is jumping up and down on a trampoline to stay in shape. And he's like, oh, I want you to be part of the show. I want you to come. And he's like, well, I would, but I'm not booked. I'm not booked, Terry. I'm not booked. In the end, though, he does come to the show, and he's the special referee for the main event. So they were kind of spoofing that whole trampoline scene on one of the recent videos where one of the Young Bucks goes to find Flip and say, look, we really want you on the show. And, he says, I'm not booked. So anyway, that's how I see that playing out. But, and I floated this idea on Twitter, what I would love to see, and this leads into one of the big stories of the week, is Neville as a surprise entrant. I'd like to see him win the whole thing and then go on to wrestle Jay Lethal for the Ring of Honor Championship on the main card and win it. And then, of course, we find out that Neville has signed a contract with Ring of Honor and he's their champion now. We got Madison Rayne, Britt Baker, Tessa Blanchard, and Chelsea Green in a women's four-way. We have Jay and Mark Briscoe taking on Scorpio Sky and Frankie Kazarian. Joey Janela takes on Hangman Page. Christopher Daniels is wrestling Stephen Amell. Marty Scurll takes on Kazuchika Okada. I'm sure Okada will have his balloons with him. I watched that last episode of Being the Elite, and I loved it when Scurll and Okada, they're walking down the same hallway, and they cross paths with one another, and Okada just turns around, and he does the hand signal to Marty with his hands. He goes, 205. Like he has sentenced Marty Scurll to obscurity on 205 Live if he loses this match. We've got, this is a pretty big match, I think a first time ever too. Kenny Omega one-on-one against Pentagon Junior. Pentagon has been keeping busy. He appeared on 2 different television shows this week. He wrestled Cage in a last man or machine standing match on Lucha Underground. And the very next night, he wrestled Sami Callihan on Impact in a Mexican death match. Both very violent matches. That is a common theme of many Pentagon matches. Match he had with, Sami Callihan before their Mexican death match. I think, was it Slammiversary? Kota Ibushi is going to team up with the Young Bucks to take on Rey Mysterio, who should be back in WWE any day now. They're probably just waiting to make the announcement until after this show is over. So Mysterio is going to be teaming with the aforementioned Phoenix and Bandido in a 6-man tag. And Cody challenges Nick Aldis for the NWA World Heavyweight Championship. I can think of no better exposure for that title than Cody winning it at All In. Obviously, there's a story to be told about his father's history with the old NWA title, this is not the same title. I mean, I think people understand the NWA doesn't have the same cachet that it once did, although, Billy Corgan and Lagana, they're doing their damnedest to try to make that title feel really special. The one thing that you can't say is that there's not effort being put in to try to make that championship feel special like it once did. And I like the whole idea of the traveling champion, like I said before, and they've been doing that with Nick Aldis. This is going to be the biggest exposure yet for that NWA title since it was resurrected. And I think Cody winning it would kind of elevate it even more in terms of its profile and the exposure that it gets. I don't know what they're going to do, but I am intrigued to see if they do pull the trigger on that title change there. And also Nick Aldis, this is a big stage for him. When I think of Magnus and all the matches he had in TNA, there are none that jump out at me as being, oh, do you remember that one special Magnus match? I don't think he really ever had that kind of match in TNA. And so here's an opportunity for him to go out and try to steal the show and have the best match of his career and the most memorable match of his career. So I think it's got check time for him on this show too. Now there is always the possibility of CM Punk making a surprise return. Cody said in an interview that Matt Jackson, I think it was, one of the Young Bucks, did reach out to Punk and made a pitch to him to be on the show or be at the show, even just for an appearance. But it sounds like it's a no-go. That was the impression that Cody had. But then again, that's exactly the sort of thing I would expect him to say. I wouldn't expect him to say, hey, there's an 80-20 chance that Punk will actually be there. So that doesn't really mean anything. Punk is doing a signing this Friday. He is part of All In Weekend. He is doing a signing at the Pro Wrestling Tee Store in Chicago on Friday. It is sold out. If Punk does appear, and I don't know if he will. I really feel it's 50-50 if he does or not. Um, if you made me make a decision one way or the other, I say no. I would say he won't be making an appearance. But if he does, I would not expect him to wrestle. I think it would just be an appearance. And even with all of the bad press that came out of the Cabana lawsuit and how bad it made Punk look when you read the text messages and the emails and all of that, I still don't expect any less than a monster reaction for Punk if he does show up. They are in Chicago. You got to remember that. It's been over 4 years since he has made any sort of wrestling appearance. It would be a real feather in the cap of Cody and the Bucks if they could get him, but they don't need him. Same with Chris Jericho. I see some rumors about that as well. Will Jericho make an appearance? Is he going, even though it's in the U.S. and he has said before that he doesn't want to do that to Vince McMahon, and New Japan is different because it's overseas. You listen to Jericho in his podcast lately, he seems to be softening his stance a little bit. He's more open to doing stuff with Impact because, Don Callis is a good friend of his. He's more open to doing stuff with ROH. Maybe he'll be at the MSG show next year. I don't see him at All In, but is it possible? Sure, anything's possible. Do they need him? No. They don't. And to me, that's also what's been kind of impressive about this, is that at the beginning of this, I would have thought this show is going to be a total flop unless they get at least that one big name from the outside that they could sort of build everything around. CM Punk would have been that name. And here we are now, less than a week out from this show. They have some big names on the show, don't get me wrong. You've got Kenny Omega wrestling and Pentagon wrestling and Okada wrestling. And so to the audience that they're going after with the show, those are big names. But they're not building the show around Okada. They're not building the show around Kenny Omega. This has been a collaborative effort here. And they haven't had to go out and just get that one big name from WWE that everybody knows just to sell tickets or just to sort of build the whole show around. They don't need Punk. They don't need Jericho. It would help them. But they did this on their own. And I think there's something to be said for that. I think whatever you may think of those guys and how many people are actually going to be in the building, we'll see. I give them a lot of credit for coming this far, and they've built something up here. We'll see how it does. In terms of pay-per-view buys, it's impossible to even make a prediction because nothing like this has ever really been done before. They've not tried anything like this before. I hope it does well. And it leads to more events like this in the future. Because to me, this is what makes wrestling fun and exciting. Any sort of options like this that get people excited outside of WWE, to me, is a good thing.